We live in a world that constantly measures us. Every scroll through social media, every comparison at work, every family gathering becomes a silent audit of our worth. The modern self-help industry tells us to just be confident, to love ourselves, to think positive, as if inadequacy were simply a mindset problem we could affirmation our way out of. But the feeling persists. That gnawing sense that no matter what you achieve, no matter how much you accomplish, you're still somehow not enough. But what if this feeling isn't a flaw in your psychology? What if it's actually the driving force behind everything you've ever done? Alfred Adler, the brilliant Viennese psychiatrist who broke from Freud to forge his own revolutionary path, discovered something unsettling. The feeling of inferiority isn't a problem to be solved. It's the very engine of human development. He found that every person, without exception, begins life in a state of profound inadequacy, and our entire personality is constructed as a response to this fundamental condition. Adler spent decades working with patients who had overcome seemingly insurmountable limitations, children born with physical disabilities who became exceptional athletes, people from poverty who created extraordinary lives, individuals crippled by self-doubt who eventually led others with quiet authority. What he discovered was that those who transformed weren't the ones who eliminated their feelings of inferiority. They were the ones who faced it honestly, understood its origins, and redirected its energy towards something meaningful beyond themselves. This video will take you deep into Adler's revolutionary understanding of the inferiority complex, not as pathology, but as the starting point of all human striving. You'll discover why your feelings of inadequacy might be signaling something important about your life direction, how your childhood position shaped your entire approach to self-worth, and the specific psychological mechanism Adler called compensation that either leads to authentic growth or destructive neurosis. If you've ever wondered why success never quite feels like enough, this exploration will change how you understand yourself. Imagine a child, small and helpless, looking up at a world of giants. Every adult can do what the child cannot: reach the shelf, open the door, move through the world with ease and autonomy. The child is utterly dependent, fundamentally powerless, acutely aware of their limitations at every moment. This isn't trauma, this isn't dysfunction. This is simply the universal human starting point. Adler observed something that escaped most of his contemporaries. We don't begin life as blank slates or innocent bundles of potential. We begin life in a state of complete inadequacy, and we know it. Unlike animals whose instincts largely carry them through development, human children are painfully conscious of their helplessness for years. This awareness, Adler argued, is the seed from which all personality grows. Consider the young boy who struggles in school while his older sister excels effortlessly. Every dinner conversation becomes a subtle reminder of his inadequacy. Every report card confirms what he already feels, that he doesn't measure up. His parents don't have to say anything cruel. The simple fact of comparison is enough, so he develops a strategy. Perhaps he becomes the class clown, trading academic achievement for social status. Perhaps he rebels entirely, rejecting the game he feels he cannot win. Perhaps he doubles down, studying late into the night, driven by a desperate need to prove his worth. Or think of the woman raised in a family where beauty and charm were the currencies of value. She watched her mother receive love in proportion to her appearance, saw her father's attention shift when her mother gained weight. Without anyone explicitly teaching her, she learned the equation: worth equals appearance. Now, decades later, she cannot pass a mirror without assessment. She cannot receive a compliment without suspicion. No amount of external validation touches the original wound of inadequacy she internalized as a child. Adler understood that human nature is fundamentally teleological. We are oriented toward goals, toward becoming, toward overcoming what we perceive ourselves to lack. Unlike Freud, who looked backward to childhood trauma as the cause of neurosis, Adler looked forward to the fictional goals we create to escape our feelings of inferiority. Every personality he discovered is essentially a strategy for moving from a felt minus to a perceived plus. In his clinical work, Adler encountered patient after patient whose presenting symptoms, anxiety, depression, relationship conflicts, somatic complaints, were surface manifestations of this deeper struggle. A man suffers from debilitating anxiety before every work presentation. Digging deeper, Adler would find not a specific traumatic event, but a childhood pattern of being overlooked, of having his voice dismissed, of feeling fundamentally unimportant. The anxiety isn't random. It's the psyche's alarm system, warning him that he's about to enter a situation where his deepest fear, his inadequacy, might be exposed. The patients who made genuine progress in Adler's practice shared a particular quality. They stopped running from their feelings of inferiority and began examining them with honesty. They could identify the specific domain where they felt inadequate, intellectually, socially, physically, morally. They could trace how this feeling shaped their life choices, their relationships, their career paths. They could see how much energy they'd spent constructing elaborate strategies to avoid ever feeling that original helplessness again. But Adler also observed a dangerous pattern. Many people spend their entire lives pursuing compensation without ever addressing the underlying inferiority feeling. They climb the career ladder but feel empty at the top. They accumulate achievements like armor but remain terrified of exposure. They construct a persona of confidence while internally still feeling like that helpless child. The compensation becomes compulsive, endless, because it's built on avoidance rather than integration. The illusion is that if you just achieve enough, prove enough, become enough in the external world, the feeling will finally go away. But Adler saw clearly, inferiority feelings that remain unconscious don't disappear with success. They intensify. The higher you climb while avoiding the root issue, the more terrified you become of falling. The more you achieve while still feeling inadequate, the more you must achieve to maintain the facade. It's a psychological treadmill that only accelerates. What Adler proposed was radically different from the prevailing therapeutic approaches of his time. He suggested that the goal wasn't to eliminate feelings of inferiority. That was impossible and even undesirable. The goal was to redirect the striving they produce away from selfish compensation and toward what he called social interest, genuine contribution to the collective welfare. True maturity, he believed, meant transforming the energy of inadequacy into service, into creation, into something meaningful, beyond the ego's endless hunger for validation. This understanding opens a doorway to a completely different relationship with that persistent voice that says you're not good enough. What if that voice isn't your enemy? What if it's trying to tell you something essential about the direction of your growth? If this content is making sense to you, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Because understanding where this feeling comes from is only the beginning. Now we need to understand how it becomes the hidden architect of your entire personality. Most people think of the inferiority complex as a clinical diagnosis, a pathology that afflicts the psychologically damaged. But Adler meant something much more fundamental and universal. He distinguished between inferiority feelings, which everyone has and which drive healthy development, and the inferiority complex, which is what happens when those feelings become toxic, overwhelming, and lead to neurotic compensation. Adler himself knew this territory intimately. Born in Vienna in 1870, he was a sickly child, suffering from rickets and repeated bouts of pneumonia. His older brother was healthy and robust, the obvious favorite. Alfred spent much of his childhood in the shadow of death and inadequacy, watching his brother excel while he struggled simply to breathe. At age 5, he nearly died from pneumonia, an experience that profoundly marked him. This early confrontation with physical limitation became the catalyst for his entire life's work. He decided to become a doctor, not despite his weakness, but because of it. His choice was an act of compensation in the healthiest sense, taking the domain of his greatest vulnerability and making it the arena of his contribution. He wasn't running from his inadequacy. He was running toward a meaningful response to it. But the path wasn't romantic or easy. Adler spent years in relative obscurity, initially following Freud, then gradually developing his own divergent ideas. The process was isolating. Breaking from the psychoanalytic establishment meant professional exile, lost friendships, and the anxiety of forging an entirely new theoretical framework alone. He spent long hours writing, thinking, seeing patients, slowly building a psychology that placed social connection and forward striving at its center rather than sexual drives and past trauma. The work was often tedious, filled with doubt. Adler wasn't constructing grand theories and inspired flashes. He was grinding through case after case, notebook after notebook, slowly distilling patterns from the messy reality of human suffering. He faced his own inadequacy as a theorist, constantly comparing himself to Freud's brilliance and Jung's mystical insights, wondering if his simpler, more pragmatic approach had value. What emerged from this process wasn't a neat system, but a lived understanding that every person is fundamentally oriented toward overcoming, toward superiority, toward becoming more than they currently are. But the direction of that striving makes all the difference. Some people compensate by dominating others, by accumulating status symbols, by constructing elaborate masks of superiority that hide their terror of inadequacy. Others transform their inferiority feelings into genuine growth, into contribution, into what Adler called the courage to be imperfect. The key insight Adler developed was this: your inferiority feelings are trying to show you where your growth edge is, but your inferiority complex is trying to protect you from ever facing that edge honestly. The complex is the defensive structure you build to avoid feeling inadequate, while the feeling itself is the raw truth that could, if faced courageously, become the foundation for authentic development. To work with inferiority feelings constructively requires something specific: the ability to observe yourself with honesty, but without judgment, to trace your compensatory strategies back to their origins, to distinguish between striving that serves your ego's fear and striving that serves something meaningful beyond yourself. It requires what Adler called social interest, the innate capacity to care about and contribute to the welfare of others, which he believed was the psychological foundation of mental health. This brings us to something crucial. Understanding the origins of your particular inferiority feelings isn't an intellectual exercise. It requires a systematic approach to excavating and transforming the patterns that have been unconsciously running your life. The approach Adler developed wasn't therapy in the modern sense. It was a method of practical psychology, a way of reorganizing your fundamental orientation toward yourself and the world. It's not about fixing something broken. It's about redirecting energy that's been trapped in defensive compensation toward creative contribution. But this redirection requires structure, specific practices, and a framework for understanding your unique psychological style. First, identify your specific inferiority feelings. Adler discovered that inferiority feelings cluster around particular domains: physical appearance, intellectual capacity, social skills, moral character, professional competence. You need to name precisely where you feel inadequate, not in vague terms, but with specific honesty. Write down the situations where shame arises, where you compare yourself unfavorably, where you feel exposed or insufficient. Notice patterns. Is it when you speak in groups? When you look in the mirror? When you see others succeed? When you make mistakes? The specificity matters because your compensation strategies are built precisely around these pain points. Second, trace your birth order and early recollections. Adler was obsessed with birth order because he saw how position in the family creates different inferiority experiences. The firstborn feels dethroned by the arrival of siblings and often compensates by becoming hyper-responsible or authoritative. The middle child feels squeezed between older and younger siblings and often becomes the mediator or rebels to carve out unique identity. The youngest may feel perpetually inadequate compared to older siblings, or may be pampered and struggle with independence. Identify your position and honestly assess how it shaped your compensatory style. What role did you adopt in your family to matter, to be seen, to avoid being nothing? Third, establish practices of contribution. This is where Adler's concept of social interest becomes practical. You need to systematically redirect your striving energy away from ego compensation and toward genuine service. This doesn't mean grand gestures. It means small, consistent actions that benefit others without expectation of recognition. Mentor someone struggling with what you've overcome. Share your knowledge freely. Help without announcing it. Listen without making it about you. Contribute to something larger than your personal adequacy project. The psychological function of this isn't altruism. It's breaking the spell of self-absorption that the inferiority complex creates. Fourth, practice the courage to be imperfect. Adler believed that perfectionism is one of the clearest signs of an inferiority complex. The desperate need to avoid any confirmation of inadequacy by never making mistakes, never showing weakness, never being anything less than flawless. The antidote is deliberate practice of imperfection. Speak up even when you're uncertain. Create something without waiting until it's perfect. Make the mistake and stay present to the discomfort rather than immediately defending or explaining. The goal isn't mediocrity. It's breaking the tyranny of needing to be superior to feel acceptable. These practices work together to create what Adler called a lifestyle change, a fundamental reorganization of how you orient yourself toward your own inadequacy. Adler himself modeled this. He was never the most brilliant theorist, never the most charismatic speaker, never the most famous psychiatrist of his era. But he contributed something uniquely valuable by staying grounded in practical psychology, in helping real people reorganize their relationship with their own striving, in insisting that mental health was fundamentally about connection and contribution rather than personal triumph. The process requires honesty without self-cruelty and persistence without compulsion. You're not trying to become adequate, you're trying to stop organizing your entire life around the fear of inadequacy. That's a different project entirely, and it leads to a different destination. But here's what Adler warned about. When you begin this process, when you start dismantling the compensatory structures you've built, something uncomfortable will emerge. The feelings you've been avoiding through achievement, through control, through performance will surface. And this confrontation is not optional if you want genuine transformation. The moment arrives in silence, often when you least expect it. You've decided to stop performing, to stop proving, to stop the endless compensation game. And in that stillness, without the distraction of achievement and validation seeking, you feel it, that original inadequacy, raw and undefended. It's the feeling a child has when they realize they don't matter in the way they need to matter, that they're fundamentally dependent and powerless in a world of giants. This is the real test Adler spoke of, not whether you can achieve, but whether you can sit with the feeling of not being enough without immediately doing something to make it go away. Because your entire personality has been constructed as a defense against this exact moment. Every compensation strategy, every achievement drive, every carefully crafted persona exists to ensure you never have to feel this vulnerable again. The psychological pain that emerges here is acute. It's not depression exactly, though it can feel heavy. It's not anxiety precisely, though it can feel urgent. It's the pain of nakedness, of standing without your armor in front of the original judgment that you're insufficient. Every instinct screams to do something, to achieve, to prove, to perform, to distract. The mind generates 1,000 reasons why you should stop this process and return to your compensatory strategies. This isn't productive. You're just being self-indulgent. Real strength means pushing through, not sitting with feelings. But if you resist the urge to flee, if you stay present to the discomfort, something unexpected happens. You begin to see how much of your life has been organized around avoiding this feeling. The career you chose to prove you're smart enough, the relationships you've maintained to prove you're lovable enough, the achievements you've pursued to prove you're important enough, the social media persona you've crafted to prove you're admirable enough. All of it, an elaborate defense against feeling what you're feeling right now. Adler observed something crucial in his patients who made real progress. They reached a point where they stopped fighting their inferiority feelings and began studying them with curiosity. Where did I learn that my worth depended on being the best? Who taught me that making mistakes meant I was defective? What happened that made connection feel dangerous? When did I decide that being ordinary was unacceptable? The answers to these questions don't come from thinking. They emerge from sitting still while the discomfort reveals its own history. The function of this discomfort is educational. It's showing you the unconscious fiction that's been driving your life, the goal of superiority you've been pursuing without ever examining whether it's what you actually want or just what you think you need to feel acceptable. Adler called these fictional finalisms. Imaginary end states where you'll finally be enough, finally be safe, finally be worthy. When I have the perfect body, when I make this amount of money, when everyone respects me, when I've proven I'm not like my parents. As you sit with the discomfort, you start to see how these fictional goals have been moving targets, how achievement never actually touches the feeling of inadequacy because the inadequacy isn't about what you've accomplished. It's about the original helplessness of childhood that got interpreted as personal deficiency. The child who felt small didn't feel that way because they were defective. They felt that way because children are small. But somewhere in your development, that factual limitation became a personal indictment, and your entire psychology organized around disproving it. The insights that arise in this space are often simple but devastating. I've spent 30 years proving I'm smart, but I still feel stupid. I've achieved everything I said would make me happy, but I'm not happy. I've built a life around being needed, but I don't actually know what I want. I've avoided vulnerability so successfully that I'm completely alone. These realizations hurt because they reveal how much time and energy has been spent running from something that was never actually true, that you were fundamentally deficient and needed to become something else to be acceptable. Adler believed this discomfort was necessary because it marked the collapse of the false self, the compensatory personality you built to hide your perceived inadequacy. The pain isn't the problem, it's the birth canal of authentic selfhood. On the other side of this confrontation isn't a person who feels superior. It's a person who no longer needs to feel superior to feel acceptable. But most people never get here. They feel the first tremor of this discomfort and immediately return to their compensatory strategies with renewed vigor. They achieve more, perform better, control harder, prove louder. The defense works. The feeling goes away. But so does the possibility of transformation. The process transforms slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. You're not suddenly confident or healed or enlightened. You're just less interested in proving. The compulsive drive to demonstrate your worth begins to quiet. You notice yourself in conversations not strategizing how to impress, but actually listening. You catch yourself starting to spin a story about your accomplishments and realize you don't need to. You make a mistake and feel the old panic rise, but it doesn't completely swallow you anymore. What emerges is strange, not the triumphant superiority you thought you were pursuing, but something quieter and more solid. A sense of being ordinary in a way that no longer feels like failure. Adler called this the courage to be imperfect, and it's a complete reorganization of how you exist in the world. You're no longer running from inadequacy towards superiority. You're simply present to your actual life with its actual limitations. The irony is that when you finally stop performing, when you finally drop the elaborate compensation strategies, people often don't notice the change you thought was so dramatic. You return to your relationships, your work, your daily life, expecting recognition of your transformation, but the world continues largely as it was. Your colleagues still see you as competent or incompetent based on their own projections. Your family still relates to you through their established patterns. Your achievements still matter or don't matter in the marketplace of status. But something has fundamentally shifted in how you relate to all of it. The anxiety about being exposed as inadequate has loosened its grip. You can receive criticism without it confirming your deepest fear, because you're no longer secretly agreeing that you're deficient. You can succeed without needing the success to prove your worth, because you're no longer trying to disprove inadequacy through achievement. You can fail without it destroying you, because failure is no longer evidence of your fundamental insufficiency. It's just failure, part of being human. What's disturbing to others sometimes is that you're no longer playing the game with the same intensity. You're not chasing status markers with the same hunger. You're not performing your value with the same desperation. You're not defending your superiority with the same vigilance. To people still trapped in their own compensation dynamics, this can read as either threatening or disappointing. You're not competing anymore, which either makes you a coward in their eyes or removes you as a satisfying opponent. The anticlimax for the external world is real. Adler saw this clearly. Genuine psychological transformation doesn't announce itself with trumpets. You don't become a guru or a success story or an inspiration. You just become more authentically yourself, which to most observers looks ordinary. The profound shift is internal. You're relating to your own inadequacy with honesty rather than horror, and that changes everything about how you move through life. This is what Adler meant by true maturity. Not the achievement of superiority, but the acceptance of your actual place in the human community. You have strengths and limitations, gifts and weaknesses, areas of competence and areas of incompetence. This isn't a problem to be solved through compensation. It's the basic condition of being human. Your value doesn't come from being superior. It comes from your contribution to the collective welfare, from your genuine connection with others, from your honest participation in the shared project of being human. Adler observed that when people made this shift, their relationships transformed fundamentally. They stopped relating to others as either threats to their superiority or opportunities for validation. They could actually see other people as separate beings with their own struggles and strivings. Empathy became possible because they were no longer so absorbed in defending against their own inadequacy. Cooperation replaced competition as the primary relational mode because they were no longer trying to prove themselves superior. The return isn't a regression to who you were before. It's a completely different way of inhabiting the same life. You go back to your work, but you're working for different reasons. You go back to your relationships, but you're relating from a different place. You go back to your goals, but they're no longer desperate attempts to escape inadequacy. You're oriented toward contribution rather than compensation, toward connection rather than domination, toward meaning rather than status. What's remarkable is that this transformation often makes you more effective in the world, not less. Freed from the psychological weight of constant compensation, you have energy for actual creation. Released from the need to be superior, you can learn from others without shame. Liberated from the terror of exposure, you can take risks that serve something meaningful. Adler noticed that his patients who achieved this often became more successful externally, but they related to that success completely differently, as fortunate circumstances for contribution rather than proof of worth. The principle Adler articulated is that psychological health isn't measured by achievement or status or even happiness. It's measured by social interest, by your capacity to care about and contribute to the welfare of others. The person who has genuinely faced their inadequacy and redirected their striving away from selfish compensation is recognizable by this quality. They don't need to be important, but they consistently do important things. They don't need to be admired, but they create work worthy of admiration. They don't need to be superior, but they help others overcome their own inferiority feelings. You don't return announced, you return transformed. And the transformation isn't visible in external markers. It's visible in how you relate to your own limitations, how you respond to others' achievements, how you contribute without needing credit, how you fail without collapsing, how you succeed without losing yourself. The old personality, built entirely around compensation, has been metabolized into something more useful, genuine capability in service of something beyond your ego's hunger for validation. This brings us to the essential question. What do you do with this understanding now? Adler would say the first step is the most radical, acknowledging that the feeling of not being good enough might be telling you something true, but not what you think. It's not telling you that you're defective. It's telling you that you're trying to compensate for inadequacy rather than transform it into contribution. The courage to be imperfect isn't about lowering standards or accepting mediocrity. It's about releasing the compulsive need to be superior so you can become genuinely capable. The process is alchemical. You're not eliminating inferiority feelings, but transmuting them. Raw inadequacy, when faced honestly, becomes the fuel for authentic development. The energy you've been spending on compensation, on proving, defending, performing, controlling, gets redirected towards something that actually matters. Not matters for your ego, but matters for the world. Not matters to make you feel adequate, but matters because it needs to be done. Adler had a profound understanding that most therapeutic approaches miss. The problem isn't that you feel inadequate, the problem is that you're trying to feel adequate. Adequacy, in the compensatory sense, is a mirage. You're chasing a state where you'll finally be enough, finally be safe, finally be beyond the reach of inadequacy, but that state doesn't exist because you started life genuinely inadequate, small, helpless, dependent. That wasn't pathology, that was reality. The pathology is organizing your entire life around disproving that original truth rather than growing from it. True freedom, in Adler's framework, is the freedom from the tyranny of needing to be superior. It's the freedom to contribute without needing credit, to learn without shame, to make mistakes without collapse, to be ordinary without depression, to be imperfect without panic. This freedom doesn't come from achievement. It comes from facing the feeling of inadequacy until it no longer controls you, until it becomes simply information about where your growth edge is rather than a verdict on your worth. The best version of yourself in this understanding isn't the person who has overcome all inadequacy. It's the person who has stopped relating to inadequacy as the enemy and started relating to it as the energy source for meaningful contribution. You're not trying to become superior, you're trying to become useful. You're not trying to prove you're enough, you're trying to contribute what you uniquely can offer. You're not trying to eliminate vulnerability, you're trying to transform it into connection. The person who has made this shift carries themselves differently. They're not performing confidence, they're grounded in their actual limitations and actual capabilities. They're not defensive about criticism. They're curious about what they can learn. They're not crushed by failure. They're engaged with the problem of how to do better. They're not inflated by success. They're attentive to how it can serve something beyond themselves. They don't need to be the center of attention, but when they speak, they're substance. They don't need to dominate, but they contribute with quiet authority. This isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning of actual living. With the energy previously trapped in compensation now available for contribution, with the attention previously absorbed by self-concern now available for genuine connection, with the fear previously driving compulsive achievement now transformed into courageous imperfection, you're finally free to engage the real questions of your life. What matters? What needs doing? How can I contribute? Where am I being called to grow, not to feel superior, but to be useful? What are you trying to prove, and who are you trying to prove it to? When you strip away the achievements and the performance and the carefully constructed image, what feeling are you running from? Adler would say you're running from the original helplessness of childhood, now interpreted as personal deficiency. He would say that every compensatory strategy you've built, the career, the image, the constant striving, is trying to disprove something that was never actually true, that you needed to be superior to be acceptable. He believed that genuine maturity meant facing inadequacy with courage, transforming the energy of compensation into contribution, and finding your worth not in being superior, but in being useful to the human community. If this video challenged how you understand yourself or revealed patterns you've been unconsciously living, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the human psyche through Alfred Adler. Until the next video.